Wow. Hi, folks. Ah, Marianne. Oh, no way. Ah, Paul, how's it going?
Happening.
Hey, I'm just gonna unplug my headphones here. Right, just give it 2 seconds and then I'm gonna start, okay? Hi, Marianne.
Hey, how are you?
2 seconds. Ah. Oh man, great. Good to see a bunch of people here. I'm just adding some slides here really quickly. Super, geez, what do I call those people? Super supporters, super supporters. Okay, can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes, loud and clear.
Oh my word. Oh, hello, Jenna. Wow, no way. This is so cool. Okay, so this one is probably the most kind of messy one that I've done so far. So I'm sort of like apologizing in advance because I'm still getting my thoughts together on this. And you probably, if I've taught you, will have seen some of this stuff before, but I think it's kind of recontextualized and becoming useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share screen and I'm going to do desktop one, okay? And then I'm going to hit play. So this one is about community, okay? And the extremely long subtitle of this is Why Super Supporters Matter and How You Can Build Deep Relationships with Your 1,000 True Fans Using Simple Social Media Strategies That Anyone Can Execute On. So if we just break that down, the first part is super supporters. These are the people who are really behind you and your mission. And they're the people who sort of like buy everything you do, who then this is slightly different to 1,000 True Fans, which we'll talk about. But super supporters, people who buy everything you do, they don't just buy everything you do, they also sort of like support you. Maybe they're contributors to your, so for example, in Design Track, we have some people who I think are super supporters. They're regular contributors to the community, the Slack community, but they're not paying me any money. They're part of my mission in a sense. So where we've spoken in the last couple of weeks about being really clear on your mission and direction, that's where the super supporters sort of come in. They're really there for you when you go through those low moments and you think, why am I doing all of this? And I think it's really important to build deep relationships with these people, right? And if we can build deep relationships with 1,000 of them, we can have a business, okay? And this will be different for every business. 1,000 True Fans is by Kevin Kelly. We'll come back to that in a second. And then we're going to talk about some simple social media strategies that anyone can execute on. This is the section that's a little bit messy, but if anyone's interested, hit me up. I think I gave out my mobile number last week, but I'll do it now again. Here. Oh, let me just center that, and then I don't need to come back and fix this slide. There we go. If anyone is interested, I'm running a workshop that's deeper into this tomorrow as part of Craft NI's Orbit program. Now that will be a bit more craft focused, but it will be 2 hours. It starts at 1:30, I think, tomorrow, on the sort of, with more concrete thoughts on this. And because Craft NI is a client of mine, and none of you are clients of mine, I'm not saying I don't appreciate you. I will have killed myself to make these slides even more awesome. But if you're interested, text me, or even if you just have a question, WhatsApp me. I'm sharing my mobile much more freely. Before we start, I'm recording all of this. I'm not really sharing this stuff. I'm sort of using it more for people who are in the Design Track Slack, or people like who are on the Propel workshops with me, who are working for the NHS, that kind of thing. But it's not really, I'm not really sharing them. It's more sort of live. I may swear, I think most of the people on here I recognize, so you probably know that. This is a giant experiment. I'm doing this for free. Look at the NHS, they're doing an amazing job, even without the PPE, which I think is disgraceful. Here's an update on the experiment. Yesterday I started, or not yesterday, I've been doing this for about a week. If anyone knows Notion, does anyone know Notion? Marianne, you need to look at Notion, because it's, you and I need to jump on a phone call after, because Notion will be really useful for you. Basically, Notion is like a kind of like organizing your mind type tool. It's really good for teachers and really good for students. And I'm kind of using it to build what I call the library. So over here, you can see Design Track OS, okay? This is nothing to do with social media, but it's useful anyway. And this is a typical Chris Murphy style thing, because I'm gonna go off on a tangent. This is the Design Track operating system. So it's like our pitch, it's like our values, it's everything. It's all the stuff that makes Design Track a business. So every time I refine the pitch, I go into that Design Track operating system and I update that file that's in there. What I'm working on just now is what I call the library, which is basically everything I've ever taught, but written kind of like this, okay? Because what I'm trying to do is put my teaching into as many hands as possible. Here is why, Marianne, never jump out of a slide deck in the middle of a presentation, but I just want to show you something, Marianne, because it's kind of important. And here is why I think Notion would be good for you. So that was from a presentation this morning. I came upon this idea this 2 days ago or 3 days ago with one of the Propel people I was mentoring. And I said to her in frustration, this guy in Design Track is like asking me how to build a mailing list. And I'm like, look, if I answer your question in a direct message in Slack, right, then that's going to benefit you, but it's not going to benefit anyone else. And the more I started thinking about that when I was walking, I thought, well, if I make my own notes, right, in Simple Note, that's like 1 times 0.1. There's not a lot of value in there because I forget to go back to the notes, etc. If I share my thinking with the guy, Dylan, in Design Track, in a direct message, that maybe has a value of 1. If I share it with the whole community in Design Track in the Slack channel, that has a much bigger value. And if I share it publicly on the web through the library, which you have access to, that the impact of the stuff goes higher, right? So this is kind of what I'm exploring at the minute. So what's that got to do with this? What that has to do with this is I'm taking this workshop that we're doing just now and I'm turning it into a kind of like a little tiny book, like I'd done tiny books before. They were not tiny books, they were really big books. These are going to be tiny books. And I'm thinking maybe I could share these, right? So this is like if 1,000 trees fall in a forest, that's going to talk about 1,000 tree fans. And this is about like why bother doing this, and we'll talk about this in a minute. It's like the 80-20 rule. We're going to talk about that as it applies to marketing. It's like the super supporters that we just talked about. So I'm thinking of publishing these as little ebook type things, just PDFs, not EPUBs, not Kindle things, just PDFs. Very, very simple, easy to publish and get out there as quick as possible. I was talking to a guy yesterday, and this will come back in when we do the pricing and positioning workshops in May. I was talking to a guy yesterday called Charles Burdett, and he is doing a really interesting thing called Workshop Tactics, which is a deck of cards that has workshop ideas for anyone who runs workshops, right? And this is the beta deck of Workshop Tactics, okay? And yesterday I bought the alpha deck, which is the finished one, okay? Oh no, it's not the alpha deck, it's the first one, sorry. The alpha deck was for sale for 30 quid. So even if we don't learn about social media, we're gonna learn something here. The alpha deck was for sale for 30 quid. It was really basic. It had no illustrations, it just had content, okay? The beta deck was for sale for 40 quid. And then he put the price up to 50 and he found people were still buying it, right? So he was prototyping his pricing while making his product. And then he launched the other day his finished thing, which is in a fancy box and has illustration, is really, really nice. And the cards are not wobbly like this. They're proper decent cards, right? And he's finished off the illustration and he's tidied up the stuff, right? The beta deck, or the finished deck, which is version 1, is not the beta was 50 and the finished deck is 60 if you buy it soon. And if you don't buy it soon, it will be 90, okay? Because this is not a deck of cards, this is a set of facilitation tools. So how we position that changes our perception of the value of that product. I realize we've gone totally down a value and pricing thing, but it's kind of useful to talk about, right? How did I find this guy? I found him on Twitter, okay? How I find everybody on Twitter, right? And when I was talking to him yesterday about his process of making an alpha, then a beta, then a finished set of cards and how he put the price up as he went through, as it became more finished, I thought, I should do this. I should say to you who are on this call, because there's only what, in terms of participants, I don't know how many people are here. If anyone's interested, go in the chat and say, I'm interested in the beta version of this PDF, and I would pay you, tell me what's a figure. What would you pay, right? 3 quid? 4 quid? 5 pounds? Paul, what do you think? Wilson?
I need to see a snippet of it first, but I wouldn't snuff it or sniff it going any 10, 20 quid, depending on the value. I've paid you 20 quid before for a PDF.
Did you? Oh my word.
Yeah.
Okay. That must be awesome. Don't know what I was doing then. I must have been, oh, awesome. Right, anyway, the idea is we take all the stuff from this workshop and we break it down into bite-sized chunks. But I would show you an example of it first, or I'd show you maybe say chapter 1, right? But it's an idea I have just now, and we will continue to explore this. Okay, so PDF Tiny Books. Leave comments in the chat. I'm Failer. The hashtag is Design Track. Share the love. Instagram. I swear to God, we're joining this week. Or we're starting this week. We have joined Instagram, but we're going to start this week. I think maybe next week. I'm not sure, but I'm going to show you what we're doing for the Instagram. What I do in one slide: record label, artist, writer of books, teacher, startup public maker of startups, the speaker at conferences, lots of different things, various clients. This is just for people who are new to this, right? So what I want to talk about first is if a tree falls in a forest. Then we're going to talk about diffusion of innovations, how ideas spread, because that's super important to social media. Then we're going to do a design track show and tell, which is where I'm going to explain how I'm thinking through the social media strategy for design track, because I believe with a show and tell, you can kind of learn by saying, how are we doing that? And what are we sort of doing here? If anyone has questions, just unmute and shout, and we'll stop and answer them as we go. And finally, in section 4, which I may have covered last time, but I'm not sure if I did, I'm going to talk about live without dead time, which is about everyone tells me they have no time to do the social media. And I'm going to talk about strategies that I use to rescue dead time so that we can use it. Okay. So the first thing is if a tree falls in a forest. Super nice image by some guy called Philip with a very unpronounceable name, who's Polish, I think, based on his spelling here, which came from Unsplash. You know that idea, if a tree falls in a forest, does it make a sound? You know that philosophical thing? And it's like, if this tree falls over, does it make a sound if no one's there to hear it, right? And for me, that's kind of like a useful metaphor for when I'm dealing with people on social media. I work with lots of different smallish creative organizations, And a general refrain that I'll often hear from people is, yeah, this is great, but I just don't have time for that. And so let's take an example of someone I had a conversation with recently. She was a potter, so she's making pots. So, you know, you've seen like Ghost. Yeah, everyone's seen Ghost with Patrick Swayze? And you've got like, you know, this, and somebody's putting their arms around you and they're making the pot together and all of that kind of stuff. And I said, I love your pots. They're really, really nice, you know, and she shows me the pots and it's all great. And I said, do you want to sell the pots? And she was like, oh yeah, of course I want to sell the pots. And I said, well, what are you doing on the marketing side of things? And she was like, oh, I don't have time for marketing. And I'm like, well, you know, if you want to sell it, right, you're going to have to do a bit of marketing. And sometimes people sort of look at me in these workshops that I run for the Prince's Trust or for Propel or for all these different organizations, and they're like, marketing is a really dirty word. They're, marketing, that feels like selling my soul, especially when I deal with artists. They're like, Marianne, you're nodding your head. And I think we might have been in a time when we were aligned to the fine art masters. And those were you? Or maybe you were after that? You're muted. Were you with the fine art people?
Yes, it was, yeah.
Man alive, okay? For anyone who was not there, that some genius in the art college in Belfast School of Art thought we should get the fine artists and the designers on the masters in the same room, and we should teach them all these principles together. Now, I believe in that with my whole heart, okay? But the fine art people, despite telling you that they are intellectual and they're deep thinkers and they're philosophical, etc., had a very limited view of the world. So whenever I talked about pricing, they would go, oh my God, we don't talk about pricing. We give our work away for free. And I would be like, well, what are you eating? You know, how are you living? And they'd be like, well, the pricing is a dirty word. And then I would say about marketing. And Johnny Campbell, one of my students who might have been around your time, Marianne, said, you know, he had a slide and it said, turn strangers into friends and turn friends into customers. And I remember sitting in the audience of this presentation and going, oh, yeah, that's genius. Where'd you get that from? And Johnny was like, Seth Godin, who's a big idol of mine. And I was like, that's great. All the artists were like, it's disgusting. It's the worst thing I've ever heard. But if you look at somebody like Damien Hirst or someone like Andy Warhol, there are lots of people who were artists who were good at marketing. And if we go right back to Michelangelo and the Sistine Chapel and all of that kind of stuff, they were doing some marketing too, right? Because they had Medici people who paid for all this fine art shit on the ceiling, right? So no one is forcing you to market your product or service, right? You can stay at home and you can make X over and over and over again and never sell any of the X's. And if you do that, that's a hobby. And I want to be 100% clear. There's nothing wrong with having a hobby, okay? But if you're running a business, you've got to consider marketing, okay? And this is where this kind of 80-20 thing comes in. Somewhere I saw a craftsperson actually being interviewed a few years ago. And I think she was an RCA graduate from the Royal College. And she was doing one of these series of small interviews for the Prince's Trust or something. And she said, I spend at least a day a week just doing marketing. And the students that I was working with were like, what the hell? You know, I don't have the time for that. And they were very kind of like, you know, my whole life is making pots, or my whole life is painting, or my whole life is making art, digital art, or, you know, insert some creative thing in there, right? And I don't have the time for this dirty business. And that's fine, but that's a hobby. And so I think you've got to start to think that your job involves maybe one day a week of doing this. I'm aware you don't have a day a week, so I'm going to give you some secrets later to help you with that. So when I say one day a week, what I mean by that, and we'll come back to this at the end, is like Mondays to Sundays. This is the most used device ever for me, okay? Was it Sunday? I think it was. We had to drive with police permission to Donegal to drop off medicine for Cara's mum and dad, and then drive back, okay? We had police permission from the north and the south. And was chatting to Michael, Cara's dad, and we got onto the subject of computers, and I said, if I had to get rid of my iPad, my laptop, or my phone, or I could only have one, this is the one I would keep because it's with me all the time, okay? So Mondays to Sundays is like the hunter-gatherer. I'm reading stuff, I'm browsing the internet, I'm looking at Twitter, I'm looking at Instagram. I'm basically filling my mind with stuff, right? that's good for two reasons. One, it's useful to put onto Twitter or Instagram or something like that, or my blog. And two, it's also good for my brain and my ideas and coming up with ideas and all of that kind of stuff. That is all going to go into the library in a section called Ideas times Execution, okay? And then Sundays for me is what I call orchestrate. That is sitting down and taking all of the notes and turning them into the week's Twitter or Instagram or whatever, okay? Super supporters we talked about a little bit before. Let's think of super supporters here. Can you see these shoes? You see these shoes? Yeah? They are Pilatus shoes by Camper, okay? And many years ago, and they sit behind me here on the shelf, right? They're just there. And the reason they're there is those are size 10, right? But they're, I think I've showed them before. They're made of a very firm material, woven material, right? And it's a partnership between Camper and some other company whose name I can't remember. I think it's Kvadrat or something, right? And when I got them, I was like, fuck, I need to buy those shoes. And when I got them, they were way too tight and I wore them to loads of things and my feet would be killing me by the time I came home. And I bought them again in size 11, okay? And I wear the size 11s. And I put the size 10s on my bookcase because they're in the Design Museum in Copenhagen. So this is like a little bit of the Design Museum in Copenhagen in my house, right? The reason I'm mentioning Camper is many years ago, do you remember, does anyone remember Bureau? It was a clothes shop, Bureau. It was a posh clothes shop for men, really. It was a bit like Paul Smith, and it was kind of along from Dean's, this posh Dean's place in town, opposite the Spires. Anyway, I went into Bureau with my mum and dad, okay? How embarrassing, right? Because I saw a pair of shoes and I thought, those shoes look really nice. My mum and dad happened to be with me and I said, look, can we just go in here? I just want to see these shoes. And I'm trying on the shoes and my mum's going, no, Christopher, get them in a larger size. And I'm like, oh my God, my whole street cred is dying here. Anyway, I got these shoes. They were the most comfortable shoes ever. This was about 10 years ago. And look at me. I don't care about fashion, but I do care about my shoes, all right? I must have maybe 10 pairs of Camper shoes. Anytime the Camper newsletter comes out, I'm like, oh my word, look at these shoes. And I am like Imelda Marcos. Does anyone know Imelda Marcos? She was the lady from the Philippines and she had loads of shoes. I'm looking on my phone because I want to find the shoes to show you. Holy moly, there must be recently deleted because I must have saved them somewhere. Oh no, I need to go right to the top. Look, just so you know, I'm not lying. I'm like, look, they've made the sole thicker, right? And they've described it to me in great detail, how they made the sole thicker, more comfortable. They still have the balls on the feet, right? Because that's part of the Pilatus brand. And now they're in orange in a technical fabric, which means they're breathable. See the way I can tell you a great length all about that, right? That is good social type email stroke, Insta stroke, Twitter stroke, brainwashing stroke. I am a super supporter, okay? At the other end of the spectrum, I want to talk about this as well. And I don't have an example here, unfortunately. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna never do this, never go out of a presentation, never ever do this because it looks really, really shit. And I just want to quickly open this because I want to drag something in, and that is this. Well, we're in the super supporter section. So it's in the last set of slides, but I want to mention it again. Another super supporter, because I'm trying to cover different bases. The shoes are like a piece of product design, okay? So they're mass manufactured. These are made by Cara. These are little tiny balls. And when we think about the Medicis, that's these famous family who had loads of money in, let's say, 1700 or something, and they spent a lot of money on art, right? We have a tendency to think now there's nobody like that anymore, right? But there still are people like that. Cara has a client who, well, I wouldn't call them a client, I would call them a Medici. And Medici is M-E-D-I-C-I maybe? Medici, yeah. We're talking Italian, we're talking Sistine Chapel, all that kind of thing. And they have bought off Cara maybe 7 things worth like 20 grand or something. So, you know, these are your super supporters. These are the people who want to know your story. They're like, oh, Cara was making the Grand National Trophy. They're excited about all of that, right? Which brings me to 1,000 True Fans, okay? Because you might be looking at the shoes and thinking, well, that's a giant company with a massive marketing budget. Or you might be looking at the silver and thinking, well, those are all expensive and they're like thousands of pounds and it takes time to build that relationship. So I want to talk about 1,000 True Fans, which is an idea by Kevin Kelly, who was one of the founders of Wired magazine. And I'll put a link in, or I'll tweet a link out to this article by Kevin Kelly. In it, he talks about, because of the long tail in the internet, we can now connect to anyone in the world, okay? And if we can find 1,000 people who we really connect with, and they can become our 1,000 True Fans, and they spend just $100 with us a year, that's a 100 grand salary, right? So for me, thinking about Design Track, and I'm sort of prototyping my thinking at the minute, if I could get 1,000 people to join the community and find enough value in the community to spend $100 a year, which is not that much really, to get access to these kinds of calls after COVID-19, to get access to their own bespoke office hours where I have a problem, can we solve it together? Almost like having access to a design consultant throughout the year. Imagine that for $100. That's not that much money. 1,000 of those, amazing. The reason that he has this 1,000 figure in mind is the 1,000 is kind of like the number you need to be able to make a reasonable salary. And I think for most people in design and creative careers and what have you, £100,000 for a salary is great, okay? But the other reason that it's the 1,000 is if you start to go above 1,000, it's really hard for you to remember everybody's name, and it's really hard for you to remember who's who, etc., okay? So that gets us to the end of that section. Now we're going to go on to, oh my word, where are we going? I don't know where we're going. We're going to go on to diffusion of innovations, which is in the wrong folder, but doesn't really matter. So what I want to talk about now is diffusion of innovations. This is how ideas get out there. And this used to be from a talk that was called On Contagion and the Inevitable Spread of Yawning. But I changed the title because we're in the middle of a contagion. But the idea was that if I yawn, you might yawn as well. And there's a lot of science around this, right? And you could start a yawning thing off, right? Another thing is like an earworm. Has anyone heard of an earworm? It's like a snappy bit of a tune that gets stuck in your head, and then you're humming it, and then someone else is humming it, and so on and so forth, okay? So I can't think of any examples of an earworm off the top of my head, but if I was to do one now, you'd all be humming it for the rest of the day, and then you'd spread that virus to other people. This is a different kind of virus. It's more like a mental virus, right? When this phone came out, or when any new thing comes out, so when Paul, Overwatch, okay, when any new thing comes out, right, that's a medical application for other people who are not aware, there are broadly these groups of people, right? And this is Diffusion of Innovations by a guy called Rogers. The person who's written the best book about this that explains this in English, well, I'll be writing a book about it soon because I've just said to you I'll do it as a beta, right? Is Seth Godin, and his book is Purple Cow. Really, really good. Anyway, there are people who queue at the Apple store to buy that first iPhone. They will stay overnight or for 2 nights because they want to be the first person to get that. That's not me. Like, there's no way I'm sleeping outside the Apple store for 2 days, okay? I'd far rather be at home, or I'd pay someone to do it for me. Then you have the early adopters. For the iPhone, that's me. That's like somebody comes back and they're like, oh my word, you need to get this phone. And I'm like, oh, is it any good? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll get a phone. And maybe I get it maybe a year later or 6 months or something. Then in the middle, we have the early majority and the late majority, right? And then at the end, we have the laggards. These are our like adopter categories, okay? I'll explain how this makes sense. This is kind of like, you know, innovators. This product is trying to get off the ground, okay? Some people have invested in that product, but until the early adopters also invest in the product and until enough people shift it over the chasm to get it into the early majority, enough people for us to make a living, right? that thing's probably not going to succeed. I have an example of that right behind me. This is Little Printer, okay? It's a printer that prints out a bespoke newspaper that comes out of here. And you press this button on the top and it prints it out, right? For me, unlike the iPhone, I was right up front in the innovators, okay? I was like, oh my word, I need this thing. So I bought it for 250 quid or something. And Cara was like, forget it, you can't buy that. And so I made a prototype so that I could convince her I needed to buy it. I bought it, and for a year it was amazing, right? Some early adopters started to buy it, but there wasn't enough. The price was too high. The marketing wasn't quite right. It was a little bit ahead of its time, and it never made it over the chasm into this middle part that you need to hit, okay? And you need to think about that for your business. So we need to cross the chasm, right? How do we reach people? That's changed, okay? In the olden days, we would share stories via like the Mad Men kind of era. And that is these kinds of people here. So if anyone's watched Mad Men, oh crikey, I need to get back into that because I got to maybe season 3 or 4 or something. But Mad Men is kind of like the height of the advertising era, where we would say the little printer is like the carousel. If anyone's seen Mad Men, it's like the carousel episode. They'll know what I'm talking about. And that is how we advertised, right? Problem is that doesn't work anymore, right? And the reason that doesn't work is because people now, if we think about TV or we think about magazines or we think about all of these things, people fast forward through the ads, yeah? Because they have set-top boxes and all of that kind of stuff. And I think if you've ever seen a talk by me before, I've said, and I've got my pajamas on, so if you see that, I'm sorry, I'm gonna buy like all of the ad space, right? Between, say, I don't know, Line of Duty season, whatever the next one is, right? Except that's on BBC, so it won't work. But anyway, buy all the ad space, and then I'm gonna get actors to walk really slowly so that when it was speeded up, they would just be walking around normally. And then you'd be like, what the hell? Why are they walking around normally? I'm fast forwarding. And then you would rewind and you would play it, and suddenly they would be walking really slowly. And that would be like a remarkable thing. And you'd tell your friends and all that kind of stuff, right? But generally speaking, unless you have that idea, which someday I will get £1 million and going to do it for fun, right? That's not going to work. So we have to use something like this, which is friend of a friend of a friend, okay? And the good thing for you folks is that the internet and Twitter and Instagram, all these things make it really easy for you to connect to people. Before your time, Marianne, but Lee and Patty, 2 students on the Masters, I talk about this project a lot. They made a project called the Big Word Project where they sold words from the dictionary for $1 a letter. And if you look down in the corner here, they sold 8,340 words. What I think is a tragedy is they took this off the internet, which I'm like, why? They linked it to Wikipedia. And I'm like, keep it up there. It's part of history. The average letter was $7 long, okay? And that was the number of words that they sold. And they were students, and that's how much money they made, right? Which was amazing for students, okay? How did that happen? That happened because I sent an email to this guy, John Gruber, and said, look, these fellas are making a viral dictionary. If you could spread the word and maybe even write a wee post on your website, it could just like 2 lines, right? I think you'll change their lives. I think that you will pay their course fees. And so Gruber wrote, new viral website dictionary from Hattie Donnelly and Lee Monroe, 2 students in Northern Ireland. Gimmick is simple. Pick any word you want, pay $1 a letter. You get to define that word as linked to your website. I bought 2. Best 3 words there was I bought 2, because that's 1 validation. And 2, he didn't just buy 1, he bought more than 1 because it was addictive. I bought loads, right? So Lee, when I was talking to him recently, said an endorsement from John Gruber, who's the guy behind that website, was like feeding it Viagra. All of a sudden things were buzzing, and before we knew it, it took off, right? Because Gruber is like an early adopter innovator person, other people look to him for, what's trendy, what's cool, what's coming up, etc. And here's an example of that, Wired magazine, which for some people would be like an innovator type magazine, because you read Wired and it's got interesting stuff in it that's new. But for Ward, they're looking at Gruber as a tastemaker and a trendsetter and what have you. And this is Grad Students Redefine Easy Money with $1 a word a letter website. I'll tell you how nuts this is. Back in the day, they sent a photographer, James Ellerker, from America to take that photo in the master's studio in Belfast. And I was like, what the hell? I mean, I contacted the people in Ward because I used to write for Ward, and I was like, we have photographers in Ireland. You know, you do not need to fly someone from America. Crazy, right? So Gruber wrote another thing when Ward was in, when Ward featured them and said, hey, you know, remember that thing? Those guys? That's like another chance to ride the wave, okay? So what you need to start to think about when we think of the Twitter and the Insta and all of that kind of stuff is finding connections. So here's a couple of examples. Kyle, who set up Get Invited with me, the ticketing company, was making a product called Visually, which was a scrapbooking tool when he was one of my undergraduate students. And, you know, I made a list of people for him and said, Elliot J. Stocks, who we had on our first founder fireside, or Simon Collison, or Trent Walton. These are the people you need to get into the orbit of because they're really going to help you. And you need to somehow get into the orbit of them. And I think I have a slide for orbits at some point that's coming. If I forget to say orbits, ask me about orbits. Pauline Clancy, who now is part of our teaching team in interaction design, she's making these prints. They're like silk screens and they're bits of typography and they're letters. And to me, there's a high degree of craft in here. Craft meets type meets graphic design, all that kind of stuff. And when she was a student, I said to her, like, you know, Swiss Miss, she's very well known for her eye on design. AceJet 170, that's a guy from Belfast called Richard Weston. He talks all about typography and art and all of that kind of stuff. Magma is another one that you need to contact, right? So there you go. Orbits. Let's come back to orbits in a second because I think I had a slide on it, or 3 slides. Who are your thought leaders, right? Make a list of those people and start to follow them and start to get into their orbit. And I'm now going to explain, and I really hope in Learning Objects that I have Alan in here, A-L-A-N. Name matches Alan in Learning Objects. Here we go, I do. So I'm just gonna drag that out here. And I'm gonna open this. And I'm going to put this in. Never do this, never make your slides live while people are watching. It's very unprofessional, but anyway, here we go. I told you this is all live and it's a big experiment. So we're actually going to rewind and go back to orbits. This is part of an exercise I do every few years when I reimagine who I am and where I'm going. And for me, at this precise moment in time, or more like 2 years ago, I was like, Alan Moore, it's really interesting. And he wrote one of the Do books, not this one, Do Purpose is very, very good. He wrote Do Design, okay? And I read Do Design and I was like, this book is really good. Mark Shaler is another one, and Seth Godin. And I put these people together because like Alan has gravitas, Mark is very startup focused, and Seth Godin is positioning himself as an educator. And I was like, you know, I'm somewhere there. I'm, you know, I have a startup mindset. I'm an educator, but what I don't have is the gravitas. Okay. So Paul, Marianne, Larissa, Emma, Iris, anyone who I've taught here will know that my style of teaching is to come in and basically F and blind and call it like it is and say things that sometimes are dreadfully un-PC. Okay. Now that's part of my brand, but I need some gravitas so that when I have my first meeting with a client, I don't scare them away, okay? I spent a long time looking at Alan, okay, getting in his orbit. This is the orbit thing I was talking about. I spent a long time looking at how he structured his website. I spent a long time looking at what the language was that he used. And I just kind of, like if Alan is a planet, okay, if Alan is a planet, I'm now going to start using objects for instead of slides. If Alan is a planet like this silver bangle, and I am a planet like this tub of like lip balm, I kind of a spaceship would be better, right? I kind of arrived at Planet Allen, and I sort of like rotated around it, thinking I'm going to research this guy, okay? And when you do that, something changes. You become kind of almost related to them, almost connected to them, even though they don't know that, okay? And it could stay like that, and that could be cool because they could be like your mentor from afar, and they don't know that they're mentoring you, but you're learning from them. And that is also cool, okay? Anyhow, this guy sends a tweet. He's Alan SMLXL. Morning ritual, walk. Was thinking about pathways, literal and metaphorical. Ones we create and ones created by others. The root of the word path means to learn, I believe. I was just back from a walk with Cara on the beach in Donegal in the pre-socially distanced times, and I sent this message to him. He wasn't following me, I was following him. And I said, sunnier with you than here in Donegal. Cara took a photo of me on the beach leaning into the wind, and I was like at this kind of angle. And so I posted it onto Twitter, and then I sent this message to him. Now, I didn't do that intentionally. I didn't think I'll post this picture, then I'll message him, then this will happen, and that. I just did what I did, right? And then sunnier with you than here in Donegal, but still a lovely wet morning walk here. Your book, brackets do, because he's written more than one book, and I want him to know I mean this book that he wrote, got me through some tough times earlier this year. Thank you, right? The next thing that happened was he must have gone and looked at my bio and seen the picture of me. He must have seen that I, on the picture of me, said it was taken by Silver Landscape. He must have clicked on her bio and looked at her stuff, and he seen some of Cara's balls, the enamel ones I just showed you. And then he then replied and said, I love Silver Landscape's work. And I said, oh, I'll put you in touch with her if you like. She's my wife, and just DM me. My DMs are open. Next thing that happened was I got a message from him as a DM. And he said, I'd love to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I DM in my phone number. This is a Saturday, and said, look, call me anytime. Like, but it's the weekend, so you don't have to do it now. Literally 5 minutes later, the phone rang, and it was Alan. He described a beautiful leaders gathering that he was having with about 10 plus people who were gathering in a house in England, and sharing some thinking around education and design and where we're going and the need for beauty in the world. And he said, would you like to come? Would you like to be one of the teachers, the people part of it? And I was like, what the fuck? And me being me, I thought, I don't want to just jump at this. I want to sort of say, yeah, I'll tell you what, we're on the phone right now. So instead of just saying yes, on Monday, I'll send you a list of things I've done in my life, and then you decide if you want to invite me, because I don't want you to invite me based on, we just walk in, right? And on the Monday, I sent him a link to some stuff, and he contacted me straight away and said, I'd love you to come. What kind of alcohol do you drink? I said, I'm not drinking, but get me Seedlip and get me tonic water. And I'm really into Seedlip. It's a type of non-alcoholic drink. And then when I got there, he was like, oh, I know the folks at Seedlip. And I was like, oh, you need to put me in touch with them. Does that make sense? So when you become in the orbit of someone, you start to become like almost gravitationally attached to them. And for me, social media is an incredibly powerful tool that allows you to do that. So start to think, who are your thought leaders? Which is great, because now we're building the slides for tomorrow live. It's amazing. What I want to talk about now is a Design Trek show and tell. Can you see this where it says show and tell? Yeah? Great. So 2 things. If we go back to the orbits, hopefully you can see my Twitter, right? Yeah? And I want to look for, or maybe I'm searching my timeline, or actually if I go search, and I'm going to look for, fuck, I hope I've spelled that right. Jasmine, am I wrong? Oh, no, here we go. See this picture here? Oh, this feels like fate, right? My cognitive behavioral therapist, because I desperately need therapy, has this belief that that the universe sends you a sign, okay? So that if a lot of things happen at the same time, it's telling you something. And this is the universe sending us a sign. It's fucking orbits right there, right? So Jasmine sent me this, and she was like, oh, don't mind, I made a little thing for your Tuesday morning lecture workshop things. And I was like, whoa, that's amazing, because I don't have the time to do this because I'm super, super busy, right? And you know, immediately I was like, look, we need to put more information on them. We need to describe what's going on, right? And that is an example of somebody who, I mean, she's one of my students, but she kind of put herself in my orbit, right? And in almost in a forcible kind of way. I didn't force myself into Alan's orbit. I nudged into his orbit. And this was also like, it's not forcible is the wrong word. It was a nice, I looked at it and I was like, that's nice, you know, and I need this shit. I need visuals, etc. So I immediately said, right, you don't have a placement. I don't have a lot of money. I can pay you a small amount of money, but what I can do is almost like give you a placement. I don't know, is Jasmine on? Jasmine, are you on this call?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I am so sorry if I'm embarrassing you. So I was like, you don't have a placement. You know, you could be like my placement, right? But, you know, remote, okay? And she was like, oh, that sounds great. And we'll leave the negotiation out of it, right? But I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put some thoughts together so that we can start to do this properly, okay? Because if I go over to close that window down, open this and go Instagram and then go design, oh, it's join design track. Nothing, no posts yet, okay? But if you want good shit, follow join design track, okay? The good shit is coming, okay? Even the people that we're following here, right, are going to teach me stuff, okay? So Hyatt Denim, Painter Jacket, Coal Drops Yard, Holly & Co., Lueva, AJ and Smart, okay? The one point I want to make here while I'm looking at this on my screen is these people are not all design thinkers or user experience or digital product. They're interesting people, okay? So Lueva is a craft-focused organization. Painter Jacket, if I look at Painter Jacket, they're a company that makes jackets, but they have some interesting messaging that I'm learning from, okay? If I go to here and go to my personal account, Fuck with Zero, spelt with an S, okay? I started posting these about 2-3 weeks ago when I just took this ridiculous picture of me with a Dolce Gusto hat on. And that was me having a shave with a beard. And then this was me looking like an idiot singing Morrissey. And, oh, this was me doing one of these workshops, right? Yeah. Do you know, the reason I'm showing this, and how do you like them apples, right? I gave one of these to my next door neighbor. The reason I'm showing that is, Cara said to me yesterday, you so shouldn't show that because you don't know what you're doing. And I was like, no. I'm learning stuff here by doing it, right? I'm understanding that some posts can be like this, and they can be square or rectangular or whatever. And stories can live forever if you put them into a category, or they can disappear after 24 hours. And that's starting to get me familiar with the tool, right? And I went through the same process when I did Twitter, which I'm much more into. Anyhow, I started to think, right? Important, AJ and Smart are the right level of gravitas, okay? My friend Ryan Rumsey, he's doing interesting work. I'm thinking about the audience, it's probably 30 to 45, okay? It's probably design focused. They understand design and the importance of design for products and for that kind of thing, right? They also are entrepreneurial. They want to create businesses. And then anytime I find someone, I stick them in here, okay? So AJ and Smart, yoga notes. I will show you yoga notes because I think that Ava Lotta, who's going to be doing one of our things, yoga notes. Ava Lotta, I must have spoken about her before, so if I'm repeating myself, I apologize, I'll keep it tight. Look, she's got all these different categories for the stories, right? And then she has thought about the way these are designed, right? So some of them are quotes by other people. This is Rumi, and this is Raja, okay? And some of them are diagrams on how to do yoga, and some of them are little drawings, and some of them are say it in Sanskrit. You see the way that there are some themes here. And as we scroll down the page, we can see that those themes sort of, you know, there's a strategy here. We're not throwing spaghetti at a wall, okay? Also, if we look at this here, we can see that it's like white, dark, white, dark, white, dark, and it's a grid, right? That is a diamond shape as we go down. So when I was talking to Ava Lotta, look, 23,000 followers, okay? When I looked at this a week or, no, pre-COVID-19, so maybe a month or so back, I interviewed her. I record all my interviews with designers for myself, and she had 22,000, so she's added another 1,000 in the last month, okay? So, AJ and Smart, Visualize Value, Second Wave Dive, Painter, Square Design. Here I'm writing some notes, and what I'm trying to do here as much as possible, and I'll put this in the book as well, okay, the PDF book. So if you want to put in the chat, like, what would you pay for the book? Because it'll have all this, like, my mind in the book, right? Sharing everything with you. I'm like, here, Painter is a bit out there as far as Design Track themes goes, but it's a brand I like for their purpose, their mission, and their messaging, okay? I can learn from that even though they are not a digital product design UXy company, okay? So push the boat out and look wider, right? Then I started to look at the types of content that I would like to share. So this is briefing Jasmine. So it's like inspiring quotations, okay? I love quotes, okay? And one of my students a few years ago, Amber McGregor, who's doing super well, said, "You love your quotes, Chris." And I do love my quotes. So if I could put those onto Instagram, it would be great, right? Diagrams. You know, if I can use diagrams to explain complicated topics, I love kind of doing that. Visualize Value by Jack Butcher. He's doing a really good job of that. Second Wave Dive by Ryan, my friend. He's doing a really good job of that. So I go a little bit off piste here. Cara, I'm taking a lot of inspiration from Jack Butcher at Visualize Value at the minute. And we're interviewing him for the Founder Series in May, late May, okay? He's really interesting. And he has a thing called, I'll come back to it, doesn't matter. Anyway, he's doing great work. And I said to Cara, I should write a blog post about what I'm learning from him. And she was like, no, I don't think you should, because like, you don't want people thinking you're ripping them off. And I'm like, that's not the way I see it. The way I see it is I'm acknowledging my inspirations. So when I talk about the need to start with why, which is Simon Sinek, right? I talk about how I'm building on that idea with starting with who, but that is Sinek's idea with the why, but I've added to it, right? But it's important to me that I acknowledge where this stuff comes from, because that's academia. And although I'm not an academic, I believe in the academic structure, right? Booklets is another thing, like carousels that you can swipe through, or beacons, like here's some great work by Block Knives, or here's some great work by Haya. Promotions is another thing, right? All of this kind of stuff. We could also do like flags. Like today we had this many people on the screencast thing that we did, right? We have people from Canada, we have people from France, you know, and start to tell the story of Design Track as a big brand, right? It's a fucking tiny brand, okay? But let's try and present it as a big brand, okay? Now what I want to do is I want to share where we're at. And I haven't even seen this file yet, so we're seeing it at the same time. Jasmine, I hope this is okay, right? Just kidding, I'm sure it'll be amazing. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, Jasmine, great work. So, yesterday this was a bit messy, and I asked Jasmine, could she tidy it up so we could walk through it today? Up here, I'll make this a little bit bigger. Up here, I was like looking at stuff, and I think I probably was sharing this with her. These are things I shared. So Jasmine did this, and I was like, oh, look at these. Look, rounded buttons are a game changer on booklets.io, right? And it's a nature of how much my business has changed in the last month. That a month ago, I thought I would be teaching like UI, and I'd talk about rounded corners on buttons and, you know, drop shadows and things like that. Now I'm like, what the fuck? That's ridiculous. That's not what I'm teaching. I'm teaching bigger shit than that. Design thinking, marketing, content, make your business a success. I'm accelerating people. That's what I'm doing. I'm not interested in rounded corners, right? And then I sent this to her because I was like, look at that. That appears in a thread type thing. And we can even have really small type on it, right? Then I started to say, okay, go take a look at AJ and Smart, okay? They have a very strong color that we could learn from. So when you see that in your Instagram feed, right, you'll be like, oh, that's AJ and Smart, okay? And whenever I did my design conference break, we used a particular shade of blue, that blue there, and our emails always had a blue thing at the top. And it was like, when you scrolled through your email and you saw it in the preview view, it was like, oh, that's from break, right? And I thought, oh, we could learn from that. We already talked about yoga notes, so we'll not talk about it again. This is Visualize Value. This is Jack Butcher, who's coming up on our founder firesides. For me, this is it's too much diagrams, and it's kind of, yeah, Marianne, I'm with you there. It's a bit too much diagrams, and, you know, I don't want to say it's boring because he's coming on the thing, right? Second Wave Dive is Ryan, my friend. There's Ryan there. He spoke at Break Conference. Now, there's all the people who are on one of his calls, okay? And I'm like, shit, maybe I need to share that because look at all of you, right? I need to say to you, go turn your videos on, let's all wave at the camera and, you know, then take a photo of it, right? And some of it's like little quotes and some of it's like, you know, and for me, he's like almost like making it as he's doing it and he's evolving into a look and feel. Because Ryan's my friend, his brand used to be like this. It was yellow and red. And you can see all this stuff is yellow and red. And then he changed his brand to make it a different kind of brand, and it's now evolved, right? I'm so super anal. I'd rather have done all the work in advance so we know where we're going and we start the way we need to go on, okay? This is Painter Jacket. These for me were interesting, yeah? It was like these quotes that say, you don't have to master everything, right? I presume they're saying that because there's nobody cited at the bottom of the quote. And that makes me think, okay, I want to share some of my knowledge. Like, you know, you don't have to know everything. You know, sometimes it's okay to be an idiot. You know, various other things. You can admit you're weak, okay? You know, these are all things that I think we could look at, right? These ones here were courtesy of Jasmine, okay? And she was like, oh, this person here, I've never seen this before until today. And I'm like, that looks nice. And then I was like, who's this? And she was like, it's in Luxembourg. And I thought, these are interesting, the way they got the little arrows, right? This was booklets.io. We talked about this when I was teaching, okay? But this made me think, yeah, we need to mention some books, yeah? And then this is one of my students, Hannah Sharp, who did Make Your Mark book, which is about women in design, amazing Kickstarter, okay? I looked at that and I was like, oh, that looks amazing. Who's that? And then I was like, oh my God, that's one of my students. That's incredible, right? And then Make Future HQ. So these were all things that Jasmine had found. And then she started to make this, okay? Now, before I started my crazy new Insta, because I don't want you to think I haven't used Instagram at all. Before I made my crazy Instagram here, right? Which is insane because it has things like black squares and stuff like that. And my daughter was like, Dad, that like you can't do that on Instagram. And I was like, really? Who told you that? And she was like, because it's like a black square. And you've done like 9. I don't mean to be rude to Caitlin, but I'm like, there's no fucking rules here. We can do whatever the fuck we want, right? Now, I made that in Photoshop so I could kind of get a feel for what it looked like before I started putting it on the internet. And Cara and Ross and Caitlin, that's my wife, my son and my daughter, they were like, Dad, you're crazy. You're wasting your time in Photoshop. And I was like, you know what? As long as I'm enjoying myself, I don't care, right? Even if I don't put it onto Instagram. And so Jasmine has done this for us, right? And I'm like, this looks great. Here's the next Founder Fireside with Andy Budd. Here's one with Vic Bell, right? All amazing. And then I'm not going to spend too long going through this because it's kind of live and we're working on it. But here's her sketches. And then here's her kind of like Founder Firesides and then Espresso lectures. She's done so much work on this. Hey, Jasmine, are you still there?
Yeah. Still here.
Fucking super proud of you. This is amazing work. Good job. I am super proud. So this, sorry to embarrass you. This here is like going through the Espresso lectures, and it's like, how could we think about these, right? Marketing, sharing stories, often online, you know, all social media, simple strategies, right? Look, use the hive mind, use other people, get other people to help you, because I don't have the time to do this, okay? So it's sense for me to pay Jasmine a small amount of money because my time is more valuable, right? And it's not that my time's more valuable, but Jasmine's time's super valuable too. It's just like I don't have any time. And my focus is making the content, right? And this just looks great, right? And for me, it was like, I have to do everything myself and I need to design. Paul, we talked about this the other day on the fireside. It's like I have to do everything myself and I need to control it and I need to do all the things and it needs to be pixel perfect. And you need to let go of that. And you and I need to have a chat about that, Paul. You know, just a mentoring session, because you are not going to get enough done if you are controlling everything, right? And Marianne, I'm so happy to see you nodding your head, because we teach like on the masters, and this is what we'll be doing on Design Track, the need for for delegation, right? Use other people and build a team. This was me, okay? And I said to Jasmine yesterday, look, I imagine that we could have, some could be in the pinky color, were like quotes by other people. And then the ones that were in the whitey creamy color were like quotes by me. Okay, so that's kind of me. And I was like, okay, I'm seeing this is possibly something we could do. These ones are by me and those ones are by someone else. Here's why you want to work with a great designer like Jasmine, because you want that person. And Paul, this is advice for you specifically, but everyone else can benefit from it. You want to empower the person that becomes your designer. You want to encourage them to go off and to investigate on their own. And you want them to come back and show you things that you didn't ask for. You want them to feel not afraid to share stuff with you. And I know anyone who I've ever taught knows that I will sit down and go, Paul, what the fuck is shit? You know, I'm not quite as bad as that. I'm trying to get better, right? But, you know, I'll call a spade, right? But when you're mentoring someone, it's really important that you sort of say, well, I wouldn't do this here because it's getting a bit hard to read, okay? But this idea that you've got is amazing. So I had tweeted to say, this week we helped, and it was like 32 IXD Belfast students, 8 Design Track designers, and I would change that to accelerators now, and 3 Ignite XLNI propellers, okay? And I did it just as a tweet, right? It was like bullets or something, right? And when I saw this by Jasmine, I was like, holy shit, that's amazing. There's another version of it, right? But for me, I'm like, it should be like this. It should be like a swipe through, yeah, in this Instagram. Okay, so there you can see how we're doing stuff live, okay? Sharing the process with you. The final thing I want to talk about, and this is going to take us probably about 5 minutes, and then we can have some questions, is the need to live without dead time. When I was a student at Glasgow School of Art, back in the 80s, somebody somewhere had a sticker, and it was on they were stuck all over Glasgow School of Art, and it said, live without dead time. And I need to go back through my sketchbooks and find it. And I remember in the 80s looking at the sticker, live without dead time, and thinking, what does that mean, right? And it took me to about sort of 50 to realize what it means, right? And so to me, it's like we can have dead time. That's like time that nothing is happening. And what I would say is, like, it's important to have dead time. It's important to have time when you're not working. It's important to sometimes just watch Too Hot to Handle. It's on Netflix. Too Hot to Handle. It's like a dating show like Love Island, and there's $100,000 prize. And if they kiss, they lose money. And if they have sex, they lose money. And if they give someone a other sexual thing, that I'll not go into details, they lose money. You know, all that kind of stuff. Really great TV if you just want to just not concentrate, okay? So, live without dead time. Hunter-gatherer we talked about at the beginning. You need to prime the brain with lots of content. Repurpose dead time. So waiting in bus queues or supermarket checkouts, build systems for finding and sharing content. Last Saturday, I was waiting in the queue to get into Sainsbury's, socially distancing, and I had to wait like 10 minutes. So I kind of used that time to catch up on what's happening in the internet and what's happening in the world. Yeah. My Safari is kind of a bit like this is a change now. This is all gone, that middle row there. This is like tools I use a lot, right? These are mostly tools or repos. This is where my work is. But under here, Pinboard, Fast Company, Swiss Miss, Brain Pickings, It's Nice That. These are all places where I can go and find inspiration. So if you haven't heard of Austin Kleon, very inspiring guy. He wrote these 3 books here, which are, I'll send out links. He wrote this book, which is amazing. In fact, we'll just talk about this book because it's the one that relates to this workshop, Show Your Work. And it's about the process, sharing your process. So see the way I just showed you what Jasmine was doing and what I'm doing. Unmute for a second. Did anyone find that useful?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Why, Laura?
I was screenshotting the hell out of it.
Oh, were you?
I was doing the same.
No way. You can screenshot away, actually. Because I think that a lot of people don't share their raw process. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I would say, let's just keep the mics unmuted because we're getting to the end. I would say that a lot of people don't share this stuff because they're worried, right? And they think, oh, if I share this, and I did check with Jasmine yesterday because I said, I'm going to share this stuff. Are you okay with that? Because, that it doesn't feel like abuse to me, but it feels like, it's opening a window into her mind and my mind. But I think that even though some of that stuff will never make it onto the Instagram, it's worth sharing for sure, right? Because it gives you an understanding of the process we're going through to build the brand. And so why I like this book, which is the second book, is it's kind of like, think process, not product is one of his things, okay? Or open up your cabinet of curiosities, right? In a sense, I'm opening up my cabinet of curiosities when I show you this shoe, right? That's part of the cabinet of curiosities. And what can we learn from that? So there's a lot to be learned from this book, okay? And I'll tell you, my goal right now is to be the next Austin Kleon. That's my goal, okay? And I'm telling you that to share it with you because if I share it with you, it's more likely to come real, like we talked about the orbits, okay? This is the real thing behind Design Track. It's like if you join Design Track, I am helping you to accelerate your career and accelerate your ideas and accelerate your product. Anyway, build a system that you can click on and find stuff. When I'm doing more UX-y stuff, this is a thing called Sidebar. Everyone has different things. This is kind of like UX, UI links, right? There's a thing called RSS. If you've never heard of RSS before, take a screenshot of that or use your phone and take a screenshot because RSS is amazing. Basically, RSS stands for really simple syndication. And what it means is that I have an app on my phone, which is called Reader, and you can see it there. And I've gone to websites and I've added what's called their feed, their syndicated links, and it goes to their website and it brings it back and puts it all into my feed reader, okay? And so this app called Reader, if I open it in a supermarket queue when we're socially distancing, I know that there's going to be some stuff in it, okay, that I can read. So here's one. Building a personal brand isn't always about making yourself look good, okay? I 100% agree with that. Anyone who's looked at my Fuck the Zero account, which is spelled with an F-S-C-K because of my tattoo, right? Anyone who's seen the Fuck the Zero Instagram account knows I'm talking about being 841 days into a journey of a year or probably more off alcohol. That's the kind of thing that most people probably would never talk about. They would be absolutely mortified and they'd be like, oh my God, maybe I come across as an alcoholic. Anyone who knows me knows I fucking love to drink and party hard. And I've done enough in my life to now be able to take a bit of a break, yeah? But building a personal brand isn't always about making yourself look good. There's a lot of lessons there, right? When you click here, this little thing, it goes and loads the page for you. You don't even need to go to the website, right? I promised you I'd make some tools that make this fast for you. I use two things, and actually I'm going to change all of this, Marianne, for Notion, actually. Notion is so amazing. And maybe, Marianne, let's chat, because I'd love to talk to you. So Simple Note is like an app on my phone, and if I click it, it's got like stuff on it, okay? So there is the tweet I tweeted this morning about this workshop, and I wrote that lying in bed, okay? So Laura, who's on this call, will know a lot of our our accountability calls. I'm either in bed or I'm sitting in my dressing gown, or this is not a dressing gown, it's a jacket, right? Simple Notes where I just dump. Bear is where I move it to when it's a bit more refined. And now what I'm doing is I'm moving it into Notion when it's like public ready, okay? So I've kind of established a system. That's for my blog, FSCK. I'm talking about, I love my Apple Watch. This is the third I've had. It's a perfect fit for me conceptually. It got me through the marathon. I use it for swimming. But you can see here at the top, right? But this says, this was a message to Aaron F. It's Aaron Fitzpatrick from Little Thunder. But there's useful content in it that could be repurposed for the FSCK blog, right? I wrote this whole message to him, okay, in WhatsApp. And then when I finished it, I said, hey, do you mind if I post that to the blog? And he was like, well, not at all, you wrote it. And I haven't posted it to the blog, but I should, right? And the only thing that was holding me back from posting it to the blog was two things: fear and laziness. That's it, okay? I just never got around to it. When I move things into Bear, which is the other app, which has more formatting, this is where I'm thinking something's a little bit more finished. So this feels like possibly a blog post, or almost more likely like a little ebook on how to validate your ideas, okay? So what I'm trying to do is build a system where have an idea, shove it in Simple Note. Start to, oh yeah, that's a good idea when I'm walking, and then I start writing it into Bear. And then when I think, okay, this needs to be refined and shared in the library, it then goes into Notion. So you see, I'm trying to build a system that is living without deadline. Tying it all together, think about your content. Think about how often it's published. Think about who's writing it. For some people, it might be ghostwritten, yeah? Or Marianne, I don't know how many people are in Boom Studios. Is it just you?
The team, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 at the moment.
And do they all,
on a board.
Okay, do the team contribute to any of the social stuff?
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's kind of the question I've written down here. Is it's our kind of social media is based on authenticity.
Yeah.
So it's around that this is what's happening, this is what's going on, this is what we're doing. But that comes, the difficulty I have is that's very closely aligned with me and my personal brand,
Mm-hmm.
and I need to separate the two out. So part of that process has been delegating the social media content, which is really hard to let go of, like really hard, painful to let go of. But
Yeah.
it's how you maintain some of that authenticity, but it's somebody else's voice and somebody else doing it. That's the challenge.
Okay, so
And it's very,
I have a suggestion for you. There's a thing on. We'll get to the end of this, and can we come back to that? Because
yeah, of course,
two more slides. What's the content for the social thing? How often is it published? When I talked to the Yoga Notes lady, Ava Lotta, she said every evening, 6 o'clock Berlin time. And I was like, how many a day? And she was like, 1. And I was like, oh, okay, so it's really consistent, right? It's 1 a day, 23,000 followers. We'll come back to the who's writing it because I want to explain something really quickly. Look at your competitors, right? We showed that earlier. How frequently do they share content? What channels do they use? What content do they share? For me, the Failure brand is a Twitter thing. And if you go and look at it on Instagram, it's like utterly confusing, which is totally intentional. But it's really important to me that I build a joint Design Trap brand, and I'd love to get Design Trap if someone else has that username. And I think for me now, I'm like, well, I should use Instagram because it's more engagement. I enjoy using it, and it would teach me 2 platforms, okay? And I'm looking at other people, and a lot of them are using Instagram, right? So I need to think about that. I'm not going to do this. This is just like, look at Monzo. If you were a fintech company, for example, you could learn a lot by how they are branding themselves and the style of the illustration. Think about things like the description you write, all of that kind of stuff, right? The community. Build a content calendar, right? 3 slides and we're done. This is like the Radio Times. You know, this is a content calendar for a client, and this is a bit more big, right? It's like breakfast seminar, monthly update to the blog, 2 newsletters per month. Quarterly report is in February. That's like a deep dive report into something. And you can see the reports are like salary surveys. This generates leads, etc., etc., etc. So we're thinking structurally about how we do that. Stick to the schedule. Don't make the mistake of starting with like loads of energy and, oh man, and also don't star out as opposed to start out. I hate spelling mistakes. With lots of, don't start out with lots of energy and then drift off and then nothing happens. What we don't want to see is that. Okay, we get to the end and it's like, this is for the older people in the audience when TV used to turn off, right? Let me just go back to here and go back to here and then go back to here because we're on to that. I'm going to keep the recording going for a second. If I go to here and then I go to here. Oh, sorry, I'm going here. I tell you, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do Twitter. It's like ridiculous. I don't even know how I'm teaching this. I love this morning's hashtag design track workshop by Failer. Oh, that's the wrong symbol. Absolutely blew my mind. Check out his workshops. I'm clearly not going to tweet this, right? Because I'd look like a dick. But I'm going to kind of put that there. And then down here, I'm going to go TKDT. And that will then expand out into a thing, right? And then I'm going to go tweet, okay? Now, Marianne, if that was me working for the Do Book Company, okay? And there's lots of them working on their social. What I might do is go like this and go, some people use the little, I'm going to say Chinaman hat, but that sounds really racist. But you know what I mean. This thing here, I think it's called a Sibylla. And then like that. And what that means is CM did that one, right? So sometimes if you look at Content Design London, which is another, as Sarah, she spoke 2 weeks ago, you'll see SR, Sarah Richards, or you'll see Lizzie Bruce, yeah? Now, that's something to consider because it's a way of indicating who the person is who made the tweet. And you could use that on Instagram as well. You don't need to use that hat thing. You know, personally, I prefer this. I prefer the long dash. But I mean, I'm not going to do that because the person is me and, you know, there's no one else, okay? But I think you've touched on a really good point, and I'm going to close this and delete. You've touched on a really good point, which is share the love, people, share the love. If you think this is good, share the love, right? You know, go on the Twitter, go on the Instagram, all that kind of stuff, and tell other people to join in. Share the workshop links and stuff. It's important that you have a voice for Boom Studios.
Yeah.
And it's important that you have a voice for Marianne Kenner.
Yeah.
And it's important that everybody else who's part of it has a voice as well. And the last bit of advice I would give to you, Marianne, is, and Paul as well, delegation is really tough. But you get better with practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's taken me a long time to get to a point at which I feel more comfortable delegating things to other people. And, you know, Jasmine will tell you, Jasmine, are you still? Jasmine.
Still here.
I tell you things like, oh, can you, that's not going to work. Can you lighten that up? And, you know, so to me, that's like guidance as a mentor. But I'm not going to suddenly go and change the entire design of everything that Jasmine has done, because what's the point of getting her to do it?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think you've got to think about that voice, especially for you. The other thing I would say is your voice may change over time. You know, when you're 30, or, you know, when I was 30 and I started doing Nesta training, family wasn't important to me. I don't know if my daughter's on this call. She's not, thank God. Family wasn't that important to me. I said it on the last one. But now that I'm 50, it is very important to me. So your values change over time, and then your voice will change over time. That's another thing to think about. But you're particularly in a particular challenge, Marianne, because you're an organization with many different people and many different voices, and that's something you have to think about. I'm going to go stop share. I'm going to escape that. I'm going to go back here and see is there any questions in the chat. I'm taking notes in Notion right now. Phil, I love Notion. It's so cool. And thank you, Jenna. She's gone. That's so awesome. Feedly, yes, Kezi, Feedly is great. It's as an RSS reader. Nobody's put any money, like how much for the book. I'm going to have to do some more. This is super insightful, just like last week. Chloe, thank you. Any questions before I stop? Think of it as free consultancy.
I have one, Chris. I really like that diffusion of innovation graph. It's not the first time I've seen it either.
Yeah.
And at the minute, we're redesigning our own website. A lot of our customers have been used to using Excel spreadsheets throughout their scientific career. There doesn't really exist software like ours, and our biggest competitor is trash. We're not going to say any more on that. They usually prefer their trash, and it's very archaic. It was designed in 2004 and doesn't look much different. So they've went back to using Excel spreadsheets because they don't think that there's a better way. So a lot of them either they don't realize that there's a better solution out there, or they're using Excel. So we've actually dedicated a portion on this revamped website to why you would use a product such as ours. And whenever I looked at your diffusion of innovation graph there, I'm thinking you probably want to write different messaging for the type of people that are in that different section of the graph. So you'll be writing a particular, so for the laggards, for instance, you'll be writing the language will differ from the early adopters.
One thing about the laggards from the diffusion of innovation is that they will never change, okay? The laggards are kind of like stuck with the thing that they already have. So if we think about diffusion of innovations with the iPhone, I'm an innovator with this, okay? But I wasn't with the iPhone because it was another level of expense that was a bit, 250 quid for a 40-year-old is I don't want to make it sound like I'm rolling in cash here, like some kind of rap star. But 250 quid for me was almost like an expense, really, a business expense. Whereas an iPhone at the time I couldn't really justify it. But I know friends who had the first iPhone. So I was probably the early adopter, a bit early, but not an innovator. My father-in-law was like a kind of middle early majority. He really got into Apple because of me, and he's now really into Apple too. Everyone else in the house got iPhones, but Kara's mum didn't. She just stuck with a Nokia, right? The brick Nokia that you could sort of like throw at a wall and it would still work. She has one of those, right? And it took almost like 5 years and showing her WhatsApp to say, you can't do this on your Nokia phone. And eventually she was like, okay, I'll take one of these phones, right? But there are some people out there who still have Nokia phones and they think they're great. And you probably know some people who are like, there's nothing wrong with my phone. And they're holding it up and you're like, what the hell? I think for your product, Paul, there'll be laggards who will always be using spreadsheets and will never change. And I don't think you should waste any time on them. But I think that your point about altering your messaging for different audiences is really important. You know, you need to think about the people who need to hear a different kind of message. Let's say you're innovator, early adopter people. They're in a private beta or something. You know what I mean? They're part of something special. They're getting to learn all that kind of thing. So if I think back to what I learned yesterday with these cards, it was fascinating, the conversation I had with Charles, who's in Design Track, because I just invited him. I was like, you should join Design Track because you're interesting and I want you to be in the conversation. When he talked about the cards, he was like, the people who were in the alpha there was, I can't think, it was maybe 30 of them or something, right? This was his really close friends that he sent it to. And he said, honestly, Chris, those cards were shit. They were just like basic cards with words on them. There was no illustrations. And then the people who were in the beta, which is this, right? These were like for sale, but they were kind of like not finished. And he was like, look, if you buy one of these, you'll get the finished cards for free. You won't have to buy them again. Effectively, you're going to save some money. But all of the people who were in the beta, including me, I didn't buy them. He gave this to me. We felt special. We felt part of something. And I think that that's something that you could do. You don't have to be, you don't have to be building Overwatch. You could be doing anything to explore that idea, that concept. Scarcity. Marianne, that'd be something you could consider too. You know, like how many people are in Boom Studios?
25 at the moment. Well, 20 given the last week.
Is there a limit to how many people can be in it?
Yes, there is, because it's space related at the
Yeah.
moment. But now we've gone online, that changes, you know.
Yeah. So even if space wasn't an issue, if we go over to, I think we're still recording, and if I just jump over to the Design Track Slack, and I'll just share my screen, and then I'm gonna get to the point where we're gonna stop. Otherwise, you know, we need to have a break, right? This is the Design Track Slack, and we've got all of our different channels. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Got all of our different channels, right? And people are sharing things, etc. Right? This is another channel called another thing called Visualize Value. This is the other guy I was talking about, the guy with the black diagrams that you weren't mad keen on. And I like his diagrams, but I think the Instagram's too dense is the thing. In here, there are, you know, well, first of all, it says Visualize Value is almost out of space. That's because they're not paying for it, right? This Slack. And so all the messages are all going to disappear eventually, right? That makes me feel pain, okay? But for me, if we think about that community, Visualize Value, versus this community, Design Track, right? And I'm going to quit that now, and that will, maybe the share will come back. There could be 1,000 people in Design Track, but for me, that's too many, okay? Because even with the 1,000 true fans, I want people who are in Design Track to feel like they're part of something. I want them to feel like they're special. And there are some people on the beta learner plan who are paying 300 quid for what I call support for life. Because they gave me, Sean is here, they gave me 300 quid. And for some of them, it's like £100 a month for 3 months, right? Because of the fit we're in, right? For some of them, like Anda, who's my first ever customer, right? She was like, what am I getting? And I was like, I have no idea, but I'll tell you what, it'll be worth more than 300 quid. And I don't know whether they think it's worth more than 300 quid. I think they do. They'll always be members of the community. They won't have to pay subscription fees or anything. So even though scarcity in a digital context there is no scarcity. You know, we could have 100,000 members. Well, it wouldn't feel the same if there was 100,000 members. I'll leave you with this last thought, and then we'll stop. And hopefully we are still recording good. We were talking about the news as a project this semester with my second year interaction design students. And I can't remember who was in the group. It was an evening, 6 o'clock, 7. Obviously we had some diehard people who were still there. And I said, we were talking about being part of communities and stuff. And I said I can't remember who it was, but I said, I'm going to describe a community to you and I want you to tell me how much it would cost to be part of. And there are 10 people in the community. Okay, there's only 10. So there can only ever be 10. When somebody, does something wrong, or decides they don't want to be in it anymore, they leave, someone else can join, right? But that's the way it works. And the community is centered around this one person, okay? And that one person is who everyone's learning from, but they're also learning from each other as well, okay? And that person is Steve Jobs. He's not dead, he's still alive, and he runs this community now, just with 10 people, right? And I can't remember who the students were, but he said, what would you pay to be in that community? And we never really finished the conversation off, but I kind of left that and thought, that would be fascinating as an, as an idea. Because I don't think you would pay 100 quid a year to be part of that. Now, I'm not saying that I'm like Steve Jobs in design. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that, scarcity is a thing and value is a thing. And the last thing I would say that I learned from Charles yesterday, which I already knew, but sometimes you get, it's very helpful when you're in conversation with someone else. He said, we got to the point together, price is your marketing. So if I am selling you this MacBook Pro and it's £2,500, well, that is marketing. We're going to do some other marketing, but the price is a form of marketing. Whereas if I was to say, here's a Dell computer, and it was like £200, that's also a form of marketing.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how that affects you, Marianne, but, anyway.
Well, yeah, it's...
Let's stop. Everybody go. Marianne, stay for 5 minutes. Everyone else, thank you very much. I hope you learned something, and you can all quit. Paul, we need to have a catch up as well. Okay.
Look forward to it.
And Marianne, sure, I'll just have a quick chat. Jasmine, I'll
brilliant.
see you later.
Well, Chris.
See you. Wow. Mind blowing when you see all the people disappear.
Yeah.
It's, first of all, it's really nice to see you.
You too, Chris. Brilliant.
Even though we're sort of separated like this, I had a really interesting conversation with Lucy, who's on Propel, and she's doing education, and she was clearly having a bad day. This was about a week or two back. We have to do a thing called mission control where we all report back at the end of the week on what we did, right? And she reported back, and I messaged her privately and said, "Are you okay? Because you seem a little bit upset." And she said, and so we jumped on a call after. And when we were in the Ormo baths, we used to, once every 2 weeks or so, we'd say, hey, we need to have a catch up because we haven't spoken for a while because we're both doing education. And we would go and sit on these 2 chairs, near the area, but where you could sort of have your lunch and stuff. And I said to Lucy, what's really funny is like, we're talking like this and we're like this far apart, right? And when we were in the Ormo baths, it was like, we were the same distance apart. And it's not like I want to put my hand on your leg, right? Or put my hand on your arm or something. It's that the possibility exists of human contact. Do you know what I mean? And she was like, I know what you mean. It's like really weird. There's something missing in the relationship that you have with someone when you're doing this. And I just find it fascinating,
It's, yeah. It's really good. Yeah. It's interesting to see kind of, we're running classes online. So we have 4 classes a week running out of our digital hub at the moment.
Whoa.
Which is, it's brilliant. And it's really interesting that we've lost some laggards because, they don't know how to turn their laptop on basically, but they know how to come to a live drawing class. Right. But the new ones that we're catching, which would fall into the kind of early adopters, innovators. Yeah. You kind of going, yeah, we want to hold on to you guys because they're future tenants.
Yeah, 100%.
They're probably students of yours as well, some of them, but they're the ones that you want to get them in, and then you want to start them on their journey within Boom, and that becomes really interesting. So this idea of a digital hub, I'm scared to even think about how to value it, like how to put a price on it, because for some people it's just a different version of what they already get by having an actual studio. It's just in a different format, being delivered in a different way. But then there's also huge potential in it as well. You know, this
Yeah.
is a way,
Yeah.
you know, and whenever I see, I'm so frustrated. I'm really glad to hear that your Craft and I one's carrying on, because there's very little support at the moment. And there's so many creative enterprises having to rethink their business model very, very quickly.
I'll be honest.
And
Yeah, just between you and me, Craft and I took a long time to get to, you know, to the point.
Yeah.
As soon as the whole thing happened, the first thing that happened was Jenna, who was on that call, who's the organizer at Ormo Baths, she sent me a message and said, "You can't run your workshop. It's only open to people from Ormo Baths." And I was like, "What?" And that was before the lockdown. And Catherine, who I was dealing with, who you probably have spoken to or contacted, she was kind of like, "Well, we could try and fit you into Craft NI." And I was like, "That's not going to work." You know, there's no space in Craft NI for it. And also I was like, and also I'm not doing it because it's like, we will not be socially distanced. And she was like, "Maybe we could do the art college." And I said, "Well, I'll look into it." And by the time I looked into it, it was like, "We're closed. You know, we're open for people who are working here, but we're not open to anyone else." And everywhere was kind of like that. And I said, "Well, we should maybe do it online." You know, I'll be honest with you, we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for Cara, the design track stuff. She sat there and she, actually, I'll just unplug this now. And hopefully you don't disappear. Oh my God, where are you? Over there. Oh my word. I've done something here. Oh God. This happened yesterday.
I can still see it.
You can see me, but I can't see you. Oh my God, what did I do here? No. Okay, you've gone. I literally can't see you anymore. I did this yesterday, unplugged from something, and it all just didn't work. And I was like, "What the hell's going on?" Maybe if I go like this or that or this. No, that's not working either. I swear to God, this has to work, because if it doesn't, I can't really continue because it's a bit freaky. Yeah, you're back. You're back. On the wall, it says Design Track Workshops and Firesides, and it's a calendar. And I'll take a photo and I'll send it to you as a message, because you're on WhatsApp,
cool.
right? And I'll move you back over here, because then I can actually look at you, because Cara tells me I don't look at the people because I'm too busy looking at my own screen. And I was really in the depths of despair. You know, like mental health wise, I was just like, oh, horrendous, and what can we do? And the whole thing was a disaster. And my whole life had been built around, you know, Propel, because I was just like, I love going in, I love talking to everybody, and I just was missing it so much. And she said, "Right, we're going to put on that wall the workshops, and you're going to give me the names." And I was going to her, "I can't do these names right now." You know, and then she was like, "Just give me a name." And eventually we got the names down, and I contacted Elliot to do the Fireside, and then I contacted, and that became a thing. And if it wasn't for Cara, we wouldn't have done it. But it was the best thing I ever did, because it feels like it's real. And I think the fact that you're doing 4 things a week is amazing. And I understand that you're a bit fearful, but I think we need to have another call, not today.
Definitely.
Today, to talk through how it might work. Because for me, one of the things at the minute is there's like a 2-tier aspect to Design Track. You know, being in the community is one, and then there's like an accelerated version. And that's like that's more. And you can do exactly the same.
We have different, I mean, the way ours is working is, yes, there's the community members, and some of that, a studio and actual workspace is attached to it. But then we also have our facilitators, and they may be dip in and use the building maybe 3 or 4 times a year, depending on what they want to do. But there's still a community within that could be built on, you know, and that's, you know, and some of that will be around training and entrepreneurship as well, because these are people that are taking that step, you know, to actually share their skills and share their knowledge. And there's, you know, there's something in that, there's a model within that as well of being able to support them and be the best at what they're doing as well. And then, I mean, then the other part of that is just the simple fundraising. It's people who will maybe send you 5-10 quid a month because they want to support what you're doing. You know, so it's how you give them value as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you reward them with some value? And you know,
Yeah.
one of the things for me, and I'm that's why we should jump on a call and like a proper one, because I'm gonna have to stop in a minute because I've got another call.
That's okay. Yeah.
And I also have to get this social media workshop ready for tomorrow because fucking hell, Craft and I'll kill me otherwise. But one of the things that, but I mean, basically, we're going to run through a lot of what we did today, but better, maybe. Do you think it would be beneficial running through the design track show and tell for people? For craft people?
Yes, I think, yes, I liked it, actually. I think giving, I mean, again, it's giving people the different examples from different sectors. I said that a lot recently. You know, it's going, have a look at what these guys are doing over here. Step outside of the craft world.
Yeah,
and, and see what they're doing, you know.
One of the problems I've had with Craft NI, and I'll just talk to you about this because we're like you're on the Learning for Life program with Chris Murphy because, you know, you were on the Masters. It is, there's no getting rid of me, Maria.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Was they are, that, and you, I know you went for that tender as well. They're very, could you replace those examples with craft ones? And I'm kind of like, what? You know, and that I'm finding frustrating. You know, because I'm like, for example, yoga notes, I showed that. They were kind of like, what's that got to do with craft? And I was like, look, you need to make a bit of a mental leap here, okay? And for some people, that they just can't, you know, and that for me, I find a bit depressing.
Well, it's probably a blended approach, isn't it? And it's finding those crafters that are being innovative, isn't it? And doing things in different ways, which is time consuming, you know, but if anybody's got the network, it's you.
Yeah. I mean, tomorrow's workshop.
I'm throwing in a few curveballs. You know?
Yeah, for me, tomorrow's workshop is more about maybe some Giovanni Corveja, who's doing some amazing gold stuff in Venice or Italy or something.
Yeah.
And you know, just talking about some people who Loeva are featuring on Instagram Live, and then also throwing in the yoga notes and stuff because, you know, Cara was, you know, I got a bit depressed and Cara said, you can't remove your personality from this training.
No, not at all.
But to me, when you're thinking about the future, one thing yesterday, if I open my Twitter, because somebody mentioned it to me yesterday. Oh, there you go. Paul Wilson's just said, thoroughly enjoyable workshop. So Benjamin Perry, who works in academia in a roundabout kind of way, he works for JISC, which is kind of like technology for academics, said, I wonder how much of the digital transformation local businesses have undertaken. I'll share the screen and then you can take a
screen. Yeah.
So can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
You take a screenshot of that.
Thank you.
So I wonder how much of the digital transformation local businesses have undertaken in the current conditions will ultimately lead to their decline once restrictions are lifted. And I thought that's really interesting. And then he said, things aren't going back to normal when this is over. Customers are rightly going to expect the same levels of service and features that business have.
Yeah.
I said, I agree. This particularly interests me as it impacts education. In my case, design education. Education has been released from its box of studios and lecture theatres not before time. I'm intrigued to see how this is or isn't embraced by universities in the new reality. And he said, completely, I was in a meeting with our CEO last week where we agreed that COVID-19 has forced us to be more agile and get better at prioritization. There will not be any going back from here. The way we are working now is the way we want us to work always. And then I went here, and he didn't reply to me, and I think he probably didn't reply because I'm getting into territory of being critical of universities, and he works in the sector. And I said, I'm half Belfast School of Art and half Join Design Track. We're never going back. This will impact my real-world classrooms too. I do wonder, however, if there's the same understanding of this critical shift in the upper echelons of Ivory Tower academia. And
nope.
I don't think that there is. And I think that when we get back in, let's say we get back in September, I think they'll be kind of like, well, wasn't that a nightmare? Thank God we're back to normal.
Yeah.
And I think what we've got to do is think, wasn't that an incredibly liberating experience?
Absolutely.
How can we retain the value of Boom Studios and being in that space, and
Yeah.
the physicality that we started this conversation with, the potential for proximity, but
Yeah.
also the ability to be a Boom Studios member from Japan.
Yeah. It's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That forces you
That's
to
it.
think about your community as a community of practice, like-minded people who don't necessarily need to be in the same place.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm going to stop there because that's a lot.
We could go on all day, couldn't we?
Good. I'm going to hit stop recording.